Well, first to say good evening to those gathered here in the church and perhaps others who are watching our service streamed online through the parish website. Our topic for this evening, and hopefully we'll get through this, it's a lot of material today, and if not, we'll carry over to next week, really with related topics as well, the Ten Commandments, something that I think many people learn as a youth or as a child. In our book, the UCAT, the questions begin number 348. Now, I'm not going to read from the UCAT. There's a lot of information there, and I encourage you to take the UCAT and begin on 348 and go through those because we have the Ten Commandments, and then, of course, we have kind of the applications, the interpretations of putting other things within the context of that. First of all, just to give a little bit of a background on commandments, and really just, we might just say rules or laws in general. Some of the oldest known writings are laws. Go back to the beginning of the written word, say 10,000 years ago or so. The earliest things that people have been able to find were laws. And there's a sense there that in a community, there was a need for order and a need for some consistency and some fairness. And so laws were among some of the earliest things ever written. And I think many people, perhaps in your own family, there have been rules and things to follow by, certainly in institutions, schools, clubs, athletic teams, and all of these things. There are rules to follow that make it orderly. I mean, I used to play Little League and softball years ago, and imagine if I wasn't that good of a hitter, imagine if I swung at the third pitch and missed, and they said, 3 strikes, you're out. Say, wait a minute, I think I deserve 4. I think I deserve another one. Well, that would be changing the rules of the game. And again, I know people that play golf that way. They're pretty frequent with the mulligan use and that type of thing. But again, there has to be a sense of consistency and also a sense of discipline as well. So the Israelites, to give a context, God had basically delivered them from their slavery in Egypt. And they're going through the wilderness with Moses as their leader. God appointed Moses as their leader, but the people were very disorderly. And so God himself gave Moses the law to give to the people. So that's the background, the context, and this is from the 20th chapter of the book of Exodus, the second book of the Bible. God delivered all these commandments. I, the Lord, am your God, who brought you out from the land of Egypt, that place of slavery. You shall not have other gods before me. You shall not carve images or idols for yourselves in the shape of anything in the sky above, or on the earth below, or in the waters beneath the earth. You shall not bow down before them and worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, inflicting punishment for their fathers' wickedness on the children of those who hate me, down to the 3rd and 4th generation, and bestowing mercy down to the 1,000th generation, on the children of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not leave unpunished him who takes his name in vain. Remember to keep holy the Sabbath day. 6 days you may labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. No work may be done then either by you or your son or daughter, or your male or female slave, or your beast, or by the alien who lives with you. In 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth and the sea and all that is in them. But on the seventh day he rested. That is why the Lord has blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Honor your father and your mother, that you may have a long life in the land which the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not kill. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, nor his male or female slave, nor his ox or ass or anything else that belongs to him. The word of the Lord. So this is the 10 Commandments that were delivered to Moses to bring to the people. Now really, before Moses even came off the mountain, the people were already breaking the commandments, living kind of in a wild way. So the commandments were to bring order to the community for their journey through the desert. Now we're going to look at these, each one, and kind of the catechetical, kind of the streamlined version of what is the commandment, what is the core of the commandment, and then what's included in that, what is the application in our lives. Now in the 10 Commandments, we can say, I would say, first of all, remember the word relationship. The first 3, in a special way, emphasize our relationship with God. And then 4 through 10, our relationship with others. Of course, all sin is offensive to God. But just to think about the sense of relationship. So if somebody were to say, well, I broke a commandment, not necessarily breaking a rule, you're breaking a relationship. So the first commandment, I am the Lord your God, you shall not have strange gods before me. That's in the core, that's the essence of the commandment. No strange gods. Now, I think that for some people, and for those who just arrived, in the UCAT book, these begin on 348. So those are, that's the section, and it's a lengthy section, so there's a lot of material there, 348 on the commandments. So the first commandment, I think somebody might have an image of somebody putting up a statue of Venus or something or other, some pagan god. But there's really more to it than that. I am the Lord your God, not have strange gods before me. The first commandment, we are called to protect our faith, to be steadfast in faith, to not break away from the church, who is an instrument of God in the world, the family of God. We should not be indifferent. We should have a spiritual life. We should be committed to our lives. Now, what would be some sins against the first commandment? One would be superstition. We believe that certain customs or certain things may bring us good luck or protect us from harm. And I'm not talking about like seat belts and things like that do protect us from harm, but just like a ritual of some kind or another. We're called to trust in God and to trust in providence. Certainly, again, anything that's of some paganism, burning incense to the moon or something like that, something that does not have any foundation in true worship. Things such as, and I grew up in a time in the 70s when these were very common. They were even in the paper. I don't read the paper that much anymore, but things like horoscopes. I can remember in junior high people playing with tarot cards, Ouija boards, all kinds of things like that. these are all against the first commandment. And really sometimes these things are opening one's heart and soul to evil. People say, well, it's just a game. Well, maybe it starts out as a game, but it can get a lot worse than that. My first trip to Mexico 25 years ago, I visited a home, and the people that were living in the home, they were family members from one of our seminarians, but I had never met them before. They said, Padre, what do you think about a Ouija board? And I said, what I think about a Ouija board is you should leave it alone. They said, oh, we've been having fun with the Ouija board, and we found out that there are 14 spirits living in this house. 12 of them are good, and 2 of them are bad. And I said, okay, I got a question for you. How do you know that the 12 that say they're good really are good? Because remember, you're opening yourself up to the father of lies. And if nothing else, it's distracting you from true worship and true prayer and true reading of God's Word in Scripture. So we had a blessing of the house and even a Mass in the house, and they threw it away. They got rid of it. I met a priest years ago who told me that a friend of his who was a priest, he went to break one up one time in a home, and the hammer flew out of his hand. There is an evil connection with the Ouija board, and certainly that is something that should be left aside. Sacrilege, of treating things that are connected to God unworthily. Even like I have here this Bible. If it was to get worn out, or soiled or tattered or something, to maybe put it in the Easter fire or something like that, not just to throw it in the landfill. There's a certain sense of a dignity of something that's used, the same as we have, for example, with vestments or chalices and things that are no longer useful, not to just treat them like junk, but some things that are used in sacred worship. This place right here, the Holy Church, we have our Lord present here in the Blessed Sacrament in the tabernacle. So this is always a place of reverence and a place of prayer, never like a casual, just a dance hall or something like that. But this is always a special place. So for us to have reverence here in this sacred space, and in the Mass as well, the gathering of the people of God. The second commandment, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Reverence for the name of God, certainly also for the saints, especially Mary, St. Joseph, and all others. And with the second commandment comes all types of things such as somebody lying under oath, called perjury in the legal sense, even cursing, trying to show off with bad language and things like that. Even the sense of derogatory language to others. Remember that people have been created in the image and likeness of God, and people have been baptized and confirmed, and so there's really a sense there of respect to all in do not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. I used to work for a shipyard, and again, there's a lot of good people who work in shipyards, but there's a lot of kind of rough people whose language was pretty bad, including the Lord's name in vain. And some people, I think, that it had become a habit for them, to where it was out of their mouth before they said it. And that's kind of you got to break the habit in that sense. Vice is a bad habit, whereas a virtue is a good habit. So you don't want to have bad habits. And then I knew people that were around people using bad language, and they would be repeating it. And so it's kind of a bad example. So certainly parents have a certain responsibility, because children will often copy parents. And so the parents should always be setting a good example for their children. A child might say something, and the teacher might say, well, where did you hear that from? So, oh, that's what my father or that's what my mother says. I say, well, it's not very good example there. But again, to be reverent with the name of God. And some people do things, I think, for shock value. And certainly that's a bad reason, to try to, shock people with what they're saying. So that's the second. And again, the third one, remember to keep holy the Lord's day. Now, in the commandment from Mount Sinai was, remember to keep holy the Sabbath day. And this is reflecting back to the book of Genesis, where God created the heavens and the earth in 6 days. And God rested on the seventh day, the Sabbath, and made it holy. Now, at the time of the Ten Commandments, the seventh day, the Sabbath, was Saturday. Sunday is the first day of the week. In the Christian era, after the resurrection of Christ, the Christians, in reflection, said, well, really for us, a day to remember is the day of the Lord's resurrection. So it really shifted from Saturday to Sunday. And really in the Jewish and the Hebrew mindset, the day began at sundown. So that's why we have a Mass on Saturday evening in anticipation of Sunday. So really, we could say anything after 4 p.m. on Saturday is really the beginning of Sunday. And so what does this mean for us to keep holy the Lord's day? In the Christian era, to make your Sunday obligation. Now with COVID, the first time in my lifetime that there's ever been a dispensation from the Sunday obligation due to this disease, this virus that's out there. But again, we're thankful we're getting about 900 people or so on a weekend. It's about 30% of what it was pre-COVID. But I'm thankful for those 900 people who feel comfortable enough, and we're doing our best to keep the church clean and the bathrooms and everything, but are making that commitment. The other 70%, they're not in sin or anything, especially if they have factors that they're concerned about. So, in the general sense, to keep holy the Lord's day. Now, we have in this parish, we have the Masses people can watch online. And so it's not the same as being here, but you still get the liturgy of the Word, the homily, the Our Father, the prayers of the faithful. You can see people that you know. And so and there's many throughout the world. There are many other places that you can watch online or record it and watch later. So we're thankful that people are making advantage of that. We've had this camera, and it's the same one that we use on Thursday nights, the same one we use at the Masses during the week as well. Now again, even if there was no COVID, which I think that this dispensation is probably going to go on for quite a while longer, but even if the bishops in the United States go back to normal, it's still acceptable to miss if one is sick. If you have the flu, or if you've had surgery, or if you have radiation, or chemo, or just if there's bad weather. We have a lot of elderly parishioners, and a fall on ice can be a very bad thing for anybody, but for an elderly person, a broken hip can be traumatic. So if somebody doesn't want to take the chance, well, that's fine. The Lord understands. If somebody tells me, Father, I'm so sorry I missed Mass, I said, if it was snowing or icy, it's perfectly okay. It's not like you were playing golf or fishing or something, but you're staying at home being safe. That's fine. Okay. The other thing about keeping holy the Lord's Day is that it should be a time for family. It should be a time where you can kind of cultivate many people. I mean, there's some nurses and policemen and others who are working on Sunday. That's okay. But it should be a time to kind of cultivate those family relationships. I can think of my own family. We always had, during the week was very hectic, people going to different things, playing basketball or whatever. But on Sunday, my mother really made an effort to have a nice meal on Sunday afternoon, and there was an expectation that we would all be home on Sunday afternoon for the meal. And I look back on that, and I appreciate that. Also, the sense if something could be put off for another day, it should be a day of rest, just to kind of recuperate. You can do some projects and things and work on things, but again, it should be a day for family time, for perhaps some social, some going to a park or going to the lake or something. That's all fine. So the first three emphasize our relationship with God. One God, true worship, reverence for the name of God, and remember the Lord's Day. Number 4, honor your father and your mother. When I was in a seminary, there was a family that came up to see me once, and there were a lot of shrines and a lot of things around the seminary, which was a monastery. And we went to this shrine for St. Joseph. And it's a big statue, hand-carved wood. And there's St. Joseph the carpenter, and then there's a little child, Jesus, beside him with it was like a carved scroll. And it had on the scroll, I.V. And I was trying to figure out what that I.V., the family that I was with, I had 4 children, they said, Mark, what does that I.V. stand for? And I was trying to make it like an acronym. I was trying to fit words into that I.V. And I wasn't doing very good. I couldn't crack the code, so to speak. So I kind of bummed out on that one. So a couple days later, I saw one of the old monks in the dining hall. And I said, Father, I was out at the St. Joseph Shrine, and I saw the great statue. It was done by a monk with St. Joseph with the child Jesus, and the child Jesus holding the scroll that has I.V. I said, what does the I.V. stand for? He looked at me like I was a total dummy. He said, that's not a word, that's Roman numerals. That's a 4, I.V. So he's basically saying that Jesus understood, honor your father and your mother. Mary, and of course St. Joseph, his foster father. So I haven't forgotten that one yet. But sometimes in Roman numerals, which some of us learned way back, I'm sure Tracy learned that way back when too. And they still use it in movies, when was a movie published or a book was published. Children obey their parents in that sense of honor. They honor them with good communication, with respect, with patience. Even if the parent is a little bit off on something or another, the child should have respect. I have been in thousands, at least 1,000 homes, many of them with children at home, and I have seen total respect for parents, and I've seen the other extreme as well on some of my home visits. I know that, from my own family, there can be tension at times and all that, but that's a serious commandment. Honor your father and your mother. So the children have a responsibility, but the parents do too, because the parents should be teachers, and with patience and with respect, and leaders. You know, I remember at a talk once on a retreat, and there was a mother, she was a grandmother as well, was giving a talk, and she said, like, for example, if a child growing up had never really had any chores to do, like cleaning the room or putting things away or, chores around the house, had never done anything, never been taught, and then all of a sudden when that child is about 14 or 15, all of a sudden the parents say, now it's time for you to do all these things. It would be hard for many children to make that transition because it hadn't been taught all those years. But it's good to get into that sense, again, of a virtue, which is a good habit, and then it's easier to continue. So in this commandment, honor your father and your mother, children and parents have a responsibility. And we see in today's world, we see a lot of grown children that have responsibility for parents. So it's almost like a full circle. Children cannot survive on their own. They need the care of parents when they're little. Sometimes the parents, we had a parishioner died a couple weeks ago, was 101 years old, and he was living with his son. So here he had once cared for his son when his son was a little boy, and then at the end of his life, his son was taking care of him. So it's kind of the full circle. Again, parents have a responsibility, I think, for restricting some things that could be harmful to the child. Again, and they have to put all of this into balance, I would say. Tracy understands this as a father as well. Like when my mother was very protective of me. When I was 16, I had saved up my money from being a paper boy, and I had bought an old car. And shortly after I got my license, I wrecked that car, and it wasn't worth fixing because it didn't cost me that much to begin with, and it would have cost more to fix it than it was worth. So I knew somebody who was selling a motorcycle for $300, and that's about what I had left, was $300. And so I told my mother, I'm going to buy a motorcycle so I can get around town. And my mother said, you will never have a motorcycle in this house. You get your own house, you can have a motorcycle. I can't control that. But in this house, you will never have a motorcycle. And part of it was because I'd already had a wreck. Fortunately, I didn't get hurt, but she was protective that I could get very hurt pretty bad in a motorcycle wreck. And even after my mother died, and I was a pastor up in the mountains, and I'd see these groups come through on the Blue Ridge Parkway with those gold wings and all the saddlebags and the chrome. I said, I ought to get one. I never did. So probably my mother, at the time I was frustrated, but that was her way of giving me a sense of protection. Every parent has to weigh these types of things. We have a lot of race car and racing shops and that type of thing in this area. And I know some of the racers, they have to think about that if their children want to get into racing, because racing is fairly dangerous as well. So again, parents have to, especially when they're little, take all of these things, be careful with them. You shall not kill, the fifth commandment. This is a commandment in which we show our respect for others created in the image and likeness of God. From the very beginning of the Bible, the sixth day of creation, God created the first man and the first woman in the image and likeness of God. And so again, certainly this commandment forbids murder. Murder is just the seeking out and killing someone, but really on a lesser degree. Even, serious anger or hatred or vengeance, prejudice, even bad thoughts. It's like somebody would say, I'm not a violent person. I would never hurt anyone. But that person made me so mad that I'm going to dream about putting that person in his or her place. Really, even the thought itself is not virtuous. To think about, oh my goodness, wouldn't that be great? Even within, somebody could say, well, I never killed anyone. Even within this, though, there's the other things that can be very risky, like for example, overdoing drugs, overdoing alcohol, recklessness, driving a car at an excessive speed. All of these things are risky behaviors that really are included in the commandment. I had a funeral service last year where the person, and it was so sad, the person who died was in her 20s, and she died of a drug overdose, and the father spoke at the end of the funeral. He had a lot of courage, where she had been in rehab and even in jail before, and it was just a terrible, terrible vice that she had. So again, she probably had these bad habits and bad things, but it was very sad because a death like that is preventable if people can get the help and also cooperate with the help that people are giving them. So again, reckless behavior can contribute. I saw that movie about the disaster on Mount Everest a few years ago. And of course, one of the great accomplishments of those who can get in that high-end mountaineering, but it's also very risky. And the one that was focused on in the movie, he was on the top of Mount Everest, and it was so cold, and he couldn't make it anymore, and he was out of oxygen and everything. And he called his wife. He had a satellite phone, and he called her in Australia, and he was in the Himalayas, and she was pregnant, and she was about to give birth to a child. And it was a very sad story that he spoke to her knowing that he would never see her again and never see the child that was soon to be born. Now again, I'm not going to openly criticize the person, but you wonder if you're married, and he'd already climbed the mountain before, and you have a pregnant wife, it's probably not the safest place to be, on the top of Mount Everest. It's again, for those who have the accomplishment. But he'd already, my thing would be, he could have said, hey, I've already done it. I don't need to prove it again. But again, it's a good movie, but it's got a lot of sadness in there too. That and his wife all the way in Australia, knowing that her husband was not going to come home. So anyway, the whole thing about risky behavior is included in a discussion of the fifth commandment, you shall not kill. Now, in the sixth commandment as well, you shall not commit adultery. Now, in a very strict sense of this would imply those who are having relations outside of marriage. But there's more, and I think everybody recognizes that. This was a problem in the Old Testament way, way back when and throughout the ages. But in the Christian era, even a reflection on this certainly includes that, but even the sense of thoughts, and really to guard one's eyes, to guard one's thoughts, to strive for purity. And a lot of this, too, everybody knows the culture that we're in is very promiscuous in the movies and in songs and all of these things. But there is a moral standard here that God laid out, and that's what we should strive for. So certainly we should strive for holiness in our thoughts and in our actions, and even in our words, in programs that we see, in books that we read. And really the greater fulfillment will be to live in the light of Christ. You know, it's I would say in today's world, and as a pastor, also as a confessor, we're going to talk about the sacrament of penance, reconciliation in the near future as we're approaching Lent. I'm aware that there are many temptations against the sixth commandment in our society, pretty much about anywhere you go. And if you go to an urban area, there's really no shame anymore about anywhere. I mean, it's so open these days. So, again, there's a lot of things. You can look in your booklet that there's a lot of things included there, and a call for discipline regarding the sixth commandment. You shall not steal. Now, certainly, again, in our narrow definition of stealing, that would be taking something that doesn't belong to you. We can reflect on that and said, really it's a sense of justice. If it doesn't belong to you, then it's not just for you to take it. So this could even be, for example, of lying on one's taxes, for example, or putting down like an expense report. I knew people, I used to work for the government, and I knew people, at least a couple of people, they went to extremes to cheat on their expense report. To me, it wasn't worth it. Like if it was 30 miles to the job site and they got reimbursed for mileage, they would write down 32. It's like back in those days we got like 10 cents a mile or something. It was almost like you're going to lie for a few cents. It's not worth it. I knew one guy, and this is a true story. He was on government business, and he went. There was a certain, what they called a per diem, how much you got per day. Like just say it was $50 a day you could get for a room. Well, he went to a hotel, and it was like the maximum one. Just say it was $50. He checked in. He went down to the desk and said, I just got a call from the office, and I have to check out. I've got another job assignment. So I'm out of here. And I don't want to pay anything at all, just because he just was in and out. But he still had his receipt. And then he went to a place down the road. It was like the Flea Hotel type thing. It was like, say it was $20. He turned in on his expense report the one that was $50. And it's like, you went to all that trouble basically to steal. Anyway, the point I'm making is that there's a certain mindset out there of people that feel like they always want to try to get a little bit of advantage of something, and this would go against the seventh commandment here about stealing. Again, I worked for a shipyard, and it was a huge operation. There were over, I think about 7,000 employees or so, civilian, and then there were military as well. And we worked on nuclear submarines, which was serious work because the submarines had to be done right because they're in a very harsh environment, maybe 1,000 feet underneath the surface of the ocean. Everything had to work right. So we had a very serious part of it. But there were other shops that were less critical in what they were doing. I remember one time we were trying to get some work done on the submarines right before Christmas. And some of the other shops were pretty much already laid back. Went over to the carpentry shop for something, and they were making these little, it's like a little duck that walks across the floor, like a little wheel and little duck feet. And they weren't doing this for the Navy. They were doing these for Christmas gifts, for their family and friends. They weren't like they had like their own Santa's workshop, And over in the pipe shop, they were making chimes, out of expensive alloy pipe. They were making chimes. Wow. And not for the government to make profit, for the people to make Christmas gifts. And then over in the sheet metal shop, they were making fireplace shovels. And this is a quality work. Say, my goodness. But really all of this would fall under this category, you shall not steal. Basically, they're taking taxpayer funded operation and using it for personal use. I remember I even heard one guy, he said this as a direct quote. He says, well, I'm a taxpayer. Well, my goodness, that doesn't mean you can just take stuff home from the work just because you're a taxpayer. So anyway, the point is that within thou shalt not steal, there's a lot of things that are included in that. It's the same as if you were in a store or in a restaurant and you were given too much change back. Somebody might say, well, it was their mistake, it's their fault. No, if you know that it was too much, then in justice, you should return it. They're going to probably do an audit at the end of the day, and then somebody is going to come up short, if they gave you too much back. I'll tell you a true story. I had just been to a retreat. This is before I went into seminary. And the priest said, if you can't make restitution, if you can't pay it back, you should make a donation to a mission or charity with that purpose. Well, anyway, I was at like a lumberyard type company, and I bought a few odds and ends for the house, and I bought a tree. It was right in the middle of the shopping cart, a whole tree. A small one, but it was right there. Well, the lady who did all the, rang up everything, she did everything but that tree. So I got out to my car, and I was in a hurry, and I said, that sure was cheap, cheaper than I thought. And I looked at my receipt, and she didn't ring up a tree that was right in the middle of the cart. So I said, well, I should run back in there and pay for it. And I said, I'm in a hurry. I'll come back later. I said, I'll do it the next time I'm on this end of town. Well, about 2-3 months went by, and I finally said, I need to go back and pay for that tree. I went back to the company, and it was out of business. I said, hopefully it wasn't because I got that tree for free, but the whole company was out of business. So I remembered what it was, just say it was $40 or whatever. I made a donation to a mission group in South America with the intention I can't pay back for that because the company was out of business, but I will make a donation, make restitution. And really that's a good thing to do. Like say somebody said, well, I stole an ice cream bar when I was 6 years old or something. Just make some kind of restitution. It's a good thing to do, to make amends for it. The 8th commandment. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. A false witness is a public lie, perjury, certainly in a courtroom situation, even rash judgment. Like a lot of times people will jump to conclusions and say, I know so-and-so did that. Well, I can speak for myself. I've jumped to conclusions before that were not right. So it's better not to make a rash judgment. Detraction. Detraction, hard to describe sometimes, but detraction is disclosing someone's faults or someone's mistake without a good reason. Just say, for example, somebody had a wreck or something. you don't need to blab about it to everybody else. Some things are just better to be quiet about. Even if it's true, detraction is kind of rubbing it in a little bit. The other thing would be boasting too much. And we all know that in our culture, there's a lot of boasting going on. Certainly in the sports world and in other worlds too, people boast about possessions or accomplishments or money or salary or whatever. Sometimes it's better just to be quiet, about that. What the latest thing would be of somebody's looks or somebody's fitness or something like that. It's just really not a nice thing to do, and really that would be against the commandment. Again, it's different to try to help somebody or talk to them privately or say a prayer for somebody who's struggling. But just talking about that person is not really productive in that way. And then the 9th commandment, should not covet your neighbor's wife. Again, this again goes back to the sense of good thoughts, of virtuous thoughts, and really it goes to the whole sense of modesty, of purity, of good language, and good thoughts. And the whole sense here is we have the saints of the church. We have statues here in the church of Mary, the Blessed Mother, great model of virtue, and also Saint Joseph, her chaste spouse. And you shall not covet your neighbor's goods. The 10th commandment commands us to desire the happiness of heaven rather than the things of the earth. Again, we're not going to be taking any of these items with us. Somebody would say, oh my goodness, did you see the neighbor's new car? I covet that. I don't know if anybody really talks like that, but the whole idea is, I covet that car or that boat or that house. The whole idea is to have a grateful heart, to be thankful for what one has been blessed with, and to appreciate it, and also in one's own level to make a return to the Lord. I remember a bishop talking about when he was the bishop of Nashville, Tennessee, and I was a seminarian in that part of the country for a while. And I remember him saying that when the envelope system came in for Sunday offerings, people would get an envelope to put into the collection. And he was saying that it was during the Depression in the 1930s, and many people, especially farmers, they didn't have any money really. They were barely making a living at all. And I remember him saying that his father had less than $1 total, less than $1 in cash. He had farm, and whatnot, but he didn't have any money. He says, but something went in that envelope. He put something, maybe a quarter or a nickel or something. He put something in that envelope. Everybody is at different levels. I used to have an old boat that I paid $500 for, and I used to think, yeah, it's kind of an old, cheap, beat-up boat. I thought, yeah, but how many millions and millions of people in the world don't have any? So I didn't want to covet somebody else's big, V8, or big jet boat or whatever. A lot of people are worse off. The same as a car. If you have a car at all, you're ahead of a lot of people that have just a bike or walking. You're ahead of them in that sense of transportation. So again, coveting is not productive as well. Coveting one neighbor's goods, all of it will be left behind anyway. I can remember when I was growing up in the 70s, there was a show on, Tracy may remember this, lifestyles of the rich and famous. I thought to myself, well, they never had one, the lifestyles of the poor and unknown. Everybody kind of looks up to, well, someone's got this house with all of these features and all of these possessions. Again, it's all going to be left behind. And we have that image in the Scripture of the man who had a bumper crop, a very successful year. And he said, what am I going to do? I will build more barns to store it all. And the Lord said, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded of you. To where will all of this go? And so the question I usually ask this to our confirmation class, what could he have done differently? He said, well, he could have shared what he had in his bumper crop. He was thinking to build more barns. Well, he had enough for himself. He could have shared that with those who were hungry, with those who were poor. Some people are very successful. I had a good friend years ago that I had visited his home and dinner with him and with his family, baptized one of his grandchildren. And he was just very successful. He got into the burger business. He had 20 Burger Kings. And he looked to be very, very healthy. 70 years old, very athletic, played sports. And right after a baptism, he was walking me out to my car and said, Father, he had a home in North Carolina, another home in Florida. He said, Father, I was just thinking, I have 1,200 bottles of wine in my wine cellar in Florida. And here in North Carolina, he says, I've got 400 bottles of wine. He said, I was just thinking, I don't know if I'm going to live long enough to drink all of this wine. And he said it just kind of on a whim. About 2 months later, he went out for a walk in his neighborhood, beautiful mountain neighborhood, came home and laid in his bed and died, I think, of a heart attack right there. So really what he said was somewhat prophetic. Here for 20, 30 years or more, he'd been collecting all this wine, but he didn't live long enough to drink it. So the point is for us to have a certain level of detachment. You know, I'm at the point now, I'm going to be 60 next month, to where if somebody comes into my office, especially somebody with a child or a wedding or something or another, and they say, oh, that's a nice cross or something like that, or that's a nice little statue, I'll just say, take it. Because maybe next year at Christmas somebody else will give me something else, you know. But I'm at the point where I'm having a good level of detachment, you know, that nothing that I know, and some people have children and grandchildren. Well, as a priest, I have 3 brothers, but in a certain sense, I don't have anybody that is a dependent on me, anybody that I have to care for. I even changed my life insurance. It was going to my brothers. I have 3 brothers. It's $25,000 Knights of Columbus insurance. I just changed the beneficiary for it to go to our seminary. You know, so, and I told the rector of the seminary, who's a friend of mine, I said, I just changed my beneficiary to the seminary, but you can't get it until after I'm gone. No, you can't get it now. You have to wait. As long as the Lord keeps me here, and I did have one great-grandfather who made it to 100, so they might have to wait a while. But again, I'm looking at things like that, is that I don't need it for myself, and I don't have any dependents that need it, or that my brothers have all got their own homes and everything. So anyway, the point there, you shall not covet your neighbor's goods. There's a certain call to be grateful for the blessings you have received, to not envy or covet other things, to be a charitable person. You know, if in the scriptures, there's a sense of giving back. Even as we look to Abraham giving 10% as an offering to the Lord. You know, the whole sense of a tithe. You know, of taking what one has and 10%. It's an easy. Even somebody who's not good at math can figure out 10%. If you have $100. Well, 10% is $10. So, I mean, it's an easy one for us to figure out. And again, charity is never a loss. It's like what I pay to the government in taxes. You know, pay to render to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, but to God what belongs to God. Like what I give to Caesar, I can't really challenge that. Otherwise, I'd be, they'd come after me, they'd take it out of me some way or another, put me in jail or something. But to God, that's a gift of the heart. And I don't ever miss anything I give to charity. I never missed it. We had a coat drive here a few months ago, and I think I put 4 coats on that truck. I think 3 of them had been gifts to me. People, I don't ask for anything, but every now and then somebody will bring me a coat for Christmas or my birthday or something or another. But again, I don't need but a couple of coats, So again, there's a certain liberating thing of cleaning up and giving things to those people who are needy right now. And everybody knows of somebody who's in need, even in a mission territory. I've been humbled when I've gone to missions, for example, like in Peru, in the jungle of Peru, where I've gone to people's homes, and I know they would give me their last slice of bread or their last glass of juice. They're very poor, but they're very, very open to giving to others. And it's humbling. It's humbling to me. Right after I was ordained to the priesthood, 25 years ago, I went to Mexico, and I went to a parish that was really in a rural area. It wasn't like in a tourist area or anything like that. It was very rural. It was kind of like in a desert. And the priest introduced me as someone who had just been ordained, like the week before. So after the Mass, a very humble man came into the sacristy, which is the room where the priests get ready, and he had in his hand probably the equivalent of about $6 or $7 or so. Now here I had just been ordained, and I had gifts, and I had traveler's checks, had a credit card. I wasn't hurting for anything. And he had money in his hand, and I didn't really speak Spanish too well at the time. And so I asked the priest, what is, I thought he wanted me to give him a blessing or something. I said, what is this? I don't understand. He said, that's his offering for you for being a priest. I thought to myself, I need to be giving him $100. And he's given me, in his economy, probably a lot of money, $6 or $7 or so. And I said, I can't take that. And the priest told me, he said, no, this is his offering to you. It would basically be insulting to him not to take it. So I took it, but I said, I really need to do something charitable. I really felt like that was a lot. But it was purely, he didn't know who I was, and I never have been back to that. I'd like to go back to that village. I don't even know exactly where it was. I'd have to ask that priest. We went on his motorcycle through this desert road, and he was going so fast, and I said, well, this is great. I'm going to die one week after my ordination. It was like a cloud of dust as we're going. But we made it. The guardian angels helped us get there. But anyway, the point is, we're not going to take it with us. And so it is best to do what we can while we are here. And also, like I just said, make arrangements in your will and in your estate for things to go to charity as well. We have that in our parish, and we're very appreciative for this very church right here, which cost millions. This was through the donations of many parishioners. Their names are on the granite outside the church. But this was all from their hearts to give for the construction of this church. And we're very appreciative of that. Next week, these 4 windows here, 2 on this side and 2 up here, they are going to be installing stained glass windows there. One family in the parish has covered the expense of those 4 stained glass windows, which is tremendous charity. We're very thankful for their kindness, and it will beautify the church. And there'll be 4 sacraments represented in those windows: baptism, confirmation, Holy Communion, the Holy Eucharist, and marriage. So that will be the 4 windows that will be installed here. And again, very thankful for the family. They're very charitable in that sense. So that's oh my goodness, 8 a.m. I'm going to ask Tracy to say a few words. Like I said, it's always a challenge to get 10 commandments in, but I'm going to have Tracy say a few words, and then we'll look to next week.
I'll keep it pretty brief tonight, guys. Something interesting happened to me this morning. I occasionally, if you don't know it or not, but at St. Mark's, which is in Huntersville, they have a 7 a.m. Mass. And as some of you know, I get up early in the morning and go work out, and then before I go to the office, I decided to go to Mass this morning, and I'm sitting outside, and it's kind of cold and rainy, and I was like, I'm not sure if I really want to go or not. And I knew the topic tonight was going to be the 10 Commandments. I ended up going in, and social distancing like they have here. There's nothing in the pews. There's no books or anything. And I'm, praying, and as the Mass is starting, I noticed something that was in the right in front of me in the pew. And this was from, let's see, what was it? June 9th, 2019. It was from Kentucky. Now it's sitting in the pew at St. Mark's, and it's an examination of the conscience for adults and teens. First thing on it was the 10 Commandments. So sometimes you kind of wonder, how do you get put in these situations? And it's very interesting. And the one thing that I will say, and I know that we'll get into reconciliation later, but as I was sitting there listening to Father Mark talk about all the commandments, sitting there thinking, God, I've done that, been there, done that. And, and it's not necessarily things that you're proud of, but it is part of, you do make mistakes. And so the one thing I would say as you're, learning on, how to be a better person, how to be a better Christian and Catholic, is remember that, you take every day as they come, and there's going to be sometimes, like I said, that you fall and you stumble, and God's always there for you. And if you think about Mother, or I guess she's a saint now, right? Yeah, Mother Teresa of Calcutta. I mean, this is a lady that, did all these fantastic things in India and all over the world. She went to confession every day. And you think, what could this lady who gives so much of her life and so much to others do to feel that she had to go to confession on a daily basis? I mean, it's just, and it's amazing. And once you get into reconciliation, you'll find that it is a very blessed sacrament, and it does take a lot of stress and relief off of you. So just be open to, as you're as you're gaining in your faith and in knowledge, that there is, light at the end of the tunnel. It's not always going to be, it's not always easy, but that's okay. And like I said, just take one step at a time. Okay? Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy. Just one quick comment following up on Tracy's point about being in a certain place and how the timing works out, or the location or the material. It happened to me this morning. I was just getting ready to come over here. Well, I was actually just getting ready for breakfast, and then to come over to unlock the church before we have Mass at 9, and it was about 7:30. I usually open the church at 8. I got a call. We have an emergency phone that sometimes people use it as a charity line or something, but it really was a true emergency. It's one of the nurses at the hospital that asking if I could come over. Now sometimes, I usually trust a nurse because they know exactly what's going on in the critical care. But sometimes if it's a family member, it might not be urgent at that moment. It might wait till after Mass or even in the afternoon. But I got the impression that it was a serious matter So I said, I'll come right now. So I went over to the hospital and went up to the critical care, and the woman was in critical care, and her family was with her, and the nurses were there, very accommodating, let me in with all the protective gear and everything. And she received the anointing of the sick, which is a prayer for healing of body and soul. Sometimes the body is worn out, but the soul will, of course, continue. Forgiveness for any sins, absolution. And then the final prayer is the Apostolic Pardon, which is entrusted to priests for those who are critically ill. We say danger of death. And like I said, it was just like if the nurse had called during Mass, the phone would have been in the sacristy, and I couldn't have gotten the message, and I couldn't have gone at that moment. But anyway, the way it worked out, right at the end of the Apostolic Pardon, and now with all of the technology and everything, there was an EKG monitor above her bed, and right after the Apostolic Pardon, the EKG monitor went to 0. So she had received the fullness of the blessings of the church with anointing of the sick, absolution, and the Apostolic Pardon right as she passed from this life. So the family was obviously very appreciative that I was there, and I was very appreciative that the nurse had called me when she did. Sometimes if they wait too long, some people, they push it out and they wait too long. I don't live at the hospital. It's going to take me a little bit of time to get there. So anyway, just that message that, and again, it doesn't always work out that timing like that, but I certainly was reminded of the importance of pastoral care, especially to the sick and the dying. Okay, so what we did this evening was the 10 Commandments. We're going to kind of continue on that theme next week with the precepts of the church and also the great commandments as Christ taught. So I would encourage you, at least I should have mentioned this last week, but I would encourage you to review that section beginning on 348, just to kind of reinforce what we talked about this evening on the commandments. And we'll look at a couple of other things next week. So thank you for your participation, and we'll see you 1 week from tonight. Also, just a reminder that Wednesday is Ash Wednesday, and so we will have 5 Masses here on Ash Wednesday, 4 in English, and the last Mass will be in Spanish. Good night.